Hi friends, I'm Kim from Sweet Red Poppy, and every week I share a new crafting, sewing, or Cricut video on my channel. So don't forget to subscribe below because I don't want you to miss out on all the fun. Now, if you've been looking for an adorable girl's dress, then this tutorial is for you. I'm sharing my free Madeline dress with you today in sizes Preemie all the way through a girl's size 12. Now I'm going to walk you through this step-by-step tutorial, and I'm going to share some of my favorite tips and tricks for sewing with knit fabric. This dress can be completely customized. It has so many different options, so you can really make the perfect dress for your little one. Before we get started, I want to quickly talk about fabric. For this pattern, I'm recommending that you use a light to medium weight knit fabric with a content of about 95% cotton to 5% lycra or spandex. Having at least 5% lycra or spandex really allows the fabric to have some elasticity, which allows it to bounce back to its original shape without getting stretched out. Some other suitable fabrics for this pattern are also double brushed polyester, French terry, really whatever fabric you choose. You just have to make sure that it has at least 50% stretch. Now, if you're not sure what that means, take a 4-inch piece of fabric. It should stretch to at least 6 inches. Your fabric must have stretch both horizontally and vertically. When you're buying your fabric, you're going to want to look for a fabric that is labeled as a 4-way stretch. Make sure you pre-wash and dry your knit fabric before you cut and sew it. This is going to prevent your fabric from shrinking after you've sewn it. When you're sewing this pattern, you can use a variety of different techniques to finish your seams. First, you can use a stretch stitch on your sewing machine. This stitch looks a little bit like a lightning bolt, and it's going to enable your seams to have a little bit more give. That allows your stitches to stretch instead of popping. The final option is to finish the seams with a serger. A serger is going to create a seam that is cut and finished in one step. This always creates a more professional looking finish. For this project, you will need the following supplies. 1 to 2.5 yards of 4-way stretch knit fabric. This will depend on the size of pattern that you're sewing. Thread, sewing pins, a ballpoint needle, scissors or a rotary cutter and a mat. You'll also need printer paper, tape, a sewing machine, and Heat and Bond soft stretch light, which is optional. To begin, you're going to want to decide what size and style you want to make. First, take chest and height measurements of whoever you're going to be making this dress for. This will give you an idea of which size they're going to fit into best. You'll want to base the size off of the chest measurement, and you can shorten or lengthen the pattern based off of their height. If you find that you're in between two sizes, go ahead and size up for the very best fit. To learn how to shorten or lengthen the pattern, be sure to download my PDF guide where I walk you through exactly how to do this. Now you're ready to print out the pattern. You can find a link to the pattern in the description below. Download the pattern to your computer and print the pattern at actual size, 100% with no scaling. To save yourself from printing out pages that you don't need, you can take advantage of the layers option. To use the layers option, go ahead and click on the paper icon on the left-hand side of the PDF. You can deselect any of the sizes that you don't want to print, which will leave only the size you do wish to print selected. You can also check out our printable instructions for a guide of which pages exactly you should be cutting out for each option. This is going to save you both time and paper. Once you've printed, immediately check your 1 by 1 inch square to ensure that your pattern has printed off correctly. If your 1 inch square measures either larger or smaller, the pattern will need to be reprinted for accuracy. Now it's time to assemble the Madeline dress. The pattern is numbered pages 1 through 44. You'll want to align the circles and the black lines together as you are piecing the pattern together. You can connect your pieces of paper together with either tape or a glue stick. Feel free to trim off the excess from each piece of paper, or you can hold the pieces up to the light and align them together without having to trim. Now that our pattern is all laid out, you'll want to refer to the PDF instructions for a guide on which pattern pieces to cut out for the dress that you want to make. Now you want to lay your fabric out in front of you and fold it in half to align your selvage edges. The selvage edges run vertically along the fabric, and the greatest amount of stretch should be going horizontally across your pattern pieces. Place your pattern pieces on top of the fabric and pin them in place. For the bodice pieces, both the front and back should be cut on the fold. Next, cut out your sleeves and your neckband. If you're making a sleeveless dress or flutter sleeves, be sure that you cut out your armbands as well. Using scissors or a rotary cutter, you'll want to cut around each piece. For the neckband, I like to use this acrylic ruler just to make sure that I get it nice and straight. If you're making a Peter Pan collar, be sure that you cut that out as well. Now let's work on cutting out our circle skirts. The skirt pattern piece will be cut on a double fold, and it's really important that you fold the fabric and align the pattern piece correctly. This is going to result in a full circular piece of fabric without any side seams. Start off with the fabric completely flat. Next, fold the fabric in half from top to bottom. Fold the fabric in half again, aligning the left side with the right side. Place a circle skirt pattern on top of the fabric. You're going to be aligning the edges of the pattern with the fabric's folded edges on both sides. Now go ahead and pin your pattern in place and cut around the curved edges only. If your fabric is less than 58 inches wide, you will need to cut 2 pattern pieces on one fold. Once you have everything cut out, go ahead and lay all of the pieces of fabric out in front of you. You'll want to check the direction on the fabric of each piece and make sure that you cut out all of the pieces that you need for the specific style of dress you're making. For the gathered skirt, you'll want to fold the fabric in half and align the edge of the fabric with the fold of the fabric and cut around the piece. Go ahead and repeat this process for the back of the skirt as well. I'm going to begin by sewing my sleeves. I'm sewing the 7/8 sleeves, but the directions are pretty much the same for all of the sleeves unless you're sewing up the flutter sleeve. First, go ahead and press the hem of your sleeves 1/2 inch up towards the wrong side of the fabric and then sew it in place. Now, if you're using a lighter weight fabric like I am, you can spray some heavy starch onto your fabric. And what this is going to do is it's going to help stabilize it, which makes it so much easier to press. Okay, so I'm going to sew the sleeves now, and I'm going to pull these 2 threads away from me when I'm starting. And I'm using a stretch stitch. I'm gently going to pull away from me. And if your fabric starts to move around, you can just readjust. I like to put a little bit of tension as I sew. If you're sewing the flutter sleeve, you're going to be sewing a basting stitch along the straight edge of this piece of fabric. You'll want to set your stitch length to the longest straight stitch. So I'm going to turn this up to a 5. And I'm just going to sew close to the edge with that basting stitch. And this is going to help me to gather my sleeve. Again, pull on those threads as you start so that your fabric doesn't get sucked up. My tension's a little tight, so it just started to naturally start gathering that ruffle for me, but we still need to gather it a little bit more. Go ahead and place your flutter sleeve to the side, and we'll continue on that in just a minute. Now we're going to work on the neckband. You'll want to make sure that you're using the correct neckband. If you're using the scoop back bodice, you're going to choose the longer neckband. Fold your neckband in half lengthwise, and then go ahead and press it really well with lots of steam. Open it up and fold the band in half with right sides together. Align the two short ends together and sew them. If you're having a hard time pressing your fabric, if it's a shifty fabric, go ahead and sew it with some more starch spray. That's going to really help stabilize it, and it makes pressing so much easier. I'm pressing this with plenty of steam because I really want to set that press line in place. Press this seam open and fold this back in half. While I'm here with the hot iron, I'm going to quarter my neckband. This will help in one of our next steps. So I'm just going to fold it in half, fold it in half again, and just do some quick presses just to show me exactly where my quarters are. If you're using the Peter Pan collar option, go ahead and sew those together now. You're going to place your pieces with the right sides facing each other and sew along the curved edge. On this collar, I like to press it before I turn it just to shrink up all of my seam allowances and my stitching in case it got stretched out. So I just go over it with some steam. Then you want to trim along the curved edge close to but not through the stitching to remove any bulk from that seam. Turn the collar pieces right side out. You can just wiggle these seams back and forth between your fingers to make sure that they're turned out all the way. And then go ahead and give it a good press. Again, with plenty of steam. For the Peter Pan collar, place the collar on the front bodice. You're going to overlap the fronts by 1/4 inch in the middle, and then you're going to pin it in place. Set the stitch length at the highest possible setting and base the collars in place. Next up is the bodice. There are two different back bodice options. There's the regular one and then there's the scoop. Both of these bodice options will be sewn exactly the same. They just have a different neckband. Go ahead and place your front bodice and your back bodice right sides together. Make sure that the shoulder seams are lining up and sew along both shoulders. Switch back to your stretch stitch, grab your threads, and sew your shoulder seams together. Give these seam allowances a quick press and use some steam just in case anything got stretched out. To sew your sleeves on, open your bodice so that the wrong side is facing downwards towards your table. Take your sleeve and place it with right sides together on the bodice. What I like to do is fold my sleeve in half and mark the center point. You can do this with a pin. Now this sleeve is going to go like this once it's sewn, but to get it there, this seems a little counterintuitive, but it's going to go backwards like this. so that right sides are facing each other. I'm going to line up my seam allowance here. You can see my seams right here with my pin. And then I'm going to come down here and line up these two edges. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Now you need to align your raw edges together. You'll notice that we have two different types of curves, so you might have to wiggle them just a little bit to get them into place, and then you'll want to pin them. You might have to just gently stretch them. And repeat that same step on the opposite side. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. Now you can go ahead and sew it together. You'll want to sew slowly to avoid making any puckers in your fabric. And don't forget to remove your pins as you go. I like to just take a quick minute to press all of my seams. Now we're going to sew the bodice sides together. With the right sides together, line up the sleeves and the bodice. Pin them in place and then go ahead and sew them. Now we're going to work on the flutter sleeve. So you can see on this side, I've already finished up my flutter sleeve, and on this side, we're going to prepare the flutter sleeve. So what I like to do is fold this in half, just to find my center point. And once I have that center point, I'm going to align this with right sides together with my seam, and I'm just going to pin it in place. And you can leave this raw edge unfinished if you want. You could also put a lettuce edge finish on it. I'm gonna leave it undone. You can see my ruffle is still just a little bit too big to fit, so I just need to gather this a little bit more. The way that I'm going to gather it is just by pulling on this top thread, and as I pull, I'm also pushing the fabric and gathering it. Once you've gathered that enough, go ahead and line it up with your arm's eye and pin it in place. You want to use plenty of pins along here so that everything lines up just perfectly. Now I'm going to take my armband, which I've already pressed in half, and I'm going to be aligning this with the raw edge of our ruffle and our bodice. I'm going to find the center again like I did earlier. Align that with my seam. This is going to create a little binding for our armband. So what I'm going to do is I'm lining up these 4 raw edges. So So I'll pin it in the middle and then I'll stretch it to the end. The armband is smaller than the arm's eye, so it will need to be stretched. So I will just stretch it like this, and then I just pinch the middle and start lining that up. And I just wiggle those raw edges until they're all lined up. Now go ahead and sew this armband onto your Flutter sleeve. And as I'm going, I like to stop and just check that everything is still lining up, that I don't have any puckers, and then I keep sewing. I'm going to quickly press this seam. You want to make sure that your raw edges are facing inwards and your band is facing outwards. I'm just going to quickly press it and then I'm going to top stitch. You can also go ahead and remove any of your basting stitches. Usually you can just pull on those and they'll come right out. Now I'm just going to top stitch right on the side of this edge, making sure that my binding is turned the right way, and just go nice and slow. I'm going to go over this again with some steam just to tighten up all of my seams and my stitches. Now I'm going to fold this bodice in half with right sides together and pin along my sides and sew it together. To finish the bodice, we're going to sew on our neckband. You'll want to divide your neckband into quarters and mark each point. This is going to make it so much easier to distribute it evenly when we're pinning it to the bodice because it is a little bit smaller. Fold your bodice in half and mark the center front and the center back. With the center front and back aligned, finish dividing your neckline into quarters. Now go ahead and align your quartered points of the neckband with your neckline. Your neckband seam should be positioned at the center back of your bodice, and right sides should be facing together. Now go ahead and pin all of your fabric in place. Sew the neckband in place gently, stretching the neckband to fit the neckline. Now go ahead and flip your neckband upwards. You can press your seam allowance downwards away from your neckband. If you want, you can also top stitch along the entire neckline, about 1/4 inch from your seam. This is going to give your neckband a really nice professional look. Make sure that you press with a lot of steam. This is going to shrink everything back up. It'll also remove any waviness from being stretched out. Finally, we're going to sew the skirt on. There are 3 different skirt options. We have our circle skirt, our gathered circle skirt, and also our regular gathered skirt. The circle skirt and the gathered circle skirt do not have any side seams, so we won't need to worry about sewing those. For the gathered skirt, you'll want to begin by laying one skirt piece out on the table in front of you. Take the second skirt and place it on top with the right sides together. Now you can pin your skirt front and back together along the side seams, leaving the top opening unpinned. want to sew along the edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to remove your basting stitches from your Peter Pan collar. This next step is going to apply to both the gathered skirt and the gathered circle skirt. You're going to sew 2 lines of basting stitches along the very top of the skirt. Then you're going to gently pull on the top 2 threads to gather your skirt. Now we're going to hem our skirt, and my favorite way to do this is using this Heat and Bond Soft Stretch Light tape. You're going to turn your skirt inside out, unroll your Heat and Bond, and then align it with the skirt's edge. And then you're going to iron it in place for about 5 to 10 seconds. If you're doing this to a curved circle skirt, then you'll just want to gently pull on your tape. You'll have some small puckers, but those will go away in the next step. Fold the skirt over along the edge of the tape and press it in place. This is going to create a really nice crisp hemline. Then you're going to remove that paper liner from the hem tape from your entire skirt. Press it again, which is going to activate our adhesive and allow it to stick to the fabric. Now this is going to give you the most beautiful hem, and this is my favorite way to hem a circle skirt. With disappearing ink or a pin, you can quarter your skirt into 4 equal sections. We're going to do this just to make sure that we evenly distribute our bodice to skirt. Now go ahead and place your bodice inside of your circle skirt. You want to make sure that your right sides are aligned together. You're going to be aligning your quartered points with your side seams. Go ahead and pin everything in place and sew with your skirt facing upwards. If you had any gathering stitches, be sure to remove those now. Turn your dress right side out and press your skirt seam upwards towards the bodice. Now you have this adorable twirly little dress. I cannot wait to see the dresses that you create with this free Madeline dress pattern. And don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Red Poppy. I will be back next week with another fun crafty or sewing video.